I think probably one of the first things that helped me understand how rapidly and how massively AI was going to impact the world was actually in 2024 when I heard about a medical breakthrough that kind of shocked the tar out of me. So what happened was there was a research group who was looking for some sort of consistency as it relates to identification of type 2 diabetes. And they had a consenting group, a cohort of patients where they uploaded all of their medical data. They even uploaded video and audio of these individuals, anything that they could try and come up with so that AI could come up with some sort of pattern recognition to see if there was anything at all that would assist in the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. And it kind of rocked my world that the pattern that it came up with was voice recordings. All AI had to do was hear the recording of an individual's voice, and with 66% accuracy for men and 71% accuracy for women, identify if they had type 2 diabetes or not. Now, this is particularly impactful because keep in mind that 50% of type 2 diabetes cases in the United States go undiagnosed right now. So this is kind of a big deal. And, how did it recognize something in the voice that led it to be able to correctly identify type 2 diabetes? Who the freak knows? We don't know. It's kind of, we can't ask it, what did you find? Was there a lilt in their voice in this particular way that indicated they had type 2 diabetes? I don't know. But, the fact that it was able to identify that as early as mid-2024, a few years ago, that's pretty significant. So there you go.
Jason, I think that's interesting. And, look, AI is applied to everything. Overall, though, it touches people, like you just gave a great story. Plus, it scared the tar out of you. But anytime AI is touching something, obviously there's people involved, careers, the long-term shift in business, period. And when it comes to healthcare and medical, I'm sure we're going to see even crazier things that scare the tar out of all of us. Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the Zero Trust Issues podcast. I'm your co-host, Tony Pietrocola. Joining me as always is our co-host, Joe Marquette.
Good morning, Tony. Good morning, Jason. Glad to be here.
We are glad you're here, Joe. So we always start with what this podcast is going to be about. And of course, there's always a cyber bent to what we do, but how AI is affecting people is incredible, right? And it's happening at an incredible clip. So we thought our guest today is a perfect guest to kind of talk about that, because not only does he work in this industry, he teaches in it. Smart professor guy we got with us, Joe. So mind your P's and Q's. So everybody gets an introduction. Game. That's right. Everybody gets an introduction to start with. Jason Lowe is an AI strategist, advisor, and an educator who helps leaders understand what AI actually changes inside organizations. He's led AI adoptions across several enterprise technologies, and more importantly, working closely with executives at turning emerging capabilities into practical solutions, which is huge these days. He's also the creator of a fantastic podcast that has great guests, I'm told, called the AI Diatribe. I enjoyed being on it. I will tell you that.
A shameless pitch.
Shameless, absolutely. He also teaches information systems and data-driven decision-making at the University of Utah's David Eccles School of Business, where he brings hand-on industry experience into the classroom. Jason, welcome to the podcast. And if I was in the class, would I get an A? How do I get an A?
You know what? I don't know. It depends on how many apples you brought to class, Tony, but we could certainly work on that together. You bet. You get an A. Come on, man. You'd get an A.
Yeah,
for sure.
You can. What is it where you just kind of come in and take the final and you're good, Tony? Wouldn't that be about where you'd ride?
Amen, brother.
And then I'd have a TA watching over his shoulder to make sure he wasn't using AI-driven tools to cheat on the final the entire time. But yeah, we'll go there.
That's smart. See, he knows. Jason, thank you so much. It's a great story. And I think, for those of us that work in the industry, there certainly is, I think we've all had sort of a watershed moment where, it really kicked your awareness into a higher gear or a higher level of awareness where you think, boy, there's things that we don't even understand yet that are happening in AI and in cybersecurity in our case. One of the things that I read that you were quoted as saying a while back, I guess actually it wasn't that long ago, but you said that we're expanding capability faster than we're expanding control. And certainly your story, mentioned, sort of speaks to that, right? Like we're expanding, in this case, the ability to identify type 2 diabetes in ways that we never knew. But there's obviously information and things that are involved with that. Are we expanding that capability in a way that is, is the control factor rather, is it something that was always there? Was the lack of control always there? Is AI demonstrating that lack of control? Or is it just like we had enough and now it's expanding away from it? And based on your answer, I'm just kind of curious, what's your advice on how to manage that? I mean, how do we get control of it?
Boy, that's a huge, huge question. I think it's important to point out that it's hard to control what you don't understand. And there's many things about deep learning and the way that, neural nets work that we just simply can't understand how it processes what it does, other than, a rough idea of the fact that neural nets work on probability and, distributions, weight distributions, so that responses are going to filter through a certain way based on how a model has been trained. And we've tried to figure out a little bit more about how it works by putting mechanisms in place where we can see the quote unquote thought process or the processes that it goes through before it reaches its answer. But even that can be fooled. One of the things that has been determined is that even in those thinking models or those processing models with inference that is visible, it will only show what it wants to show. It is possible for it to withhold certain information from the thought process that it makes visible before it actually provides an answer. So, is it out of control? No. Is it something that could get out of control? I suppose. One of the things that's really interesting, and Tony, you may recall, we talked about this a little bit on the AI Diatribe podcast, was that there is a thing called continuous learning that everybody seems to be really, really scared of. Continuous learning is kind of interesting because AI models right now, they're like the movie 50 First Dates, man. They're like Drew Barrymore in the movie 50 First Dates, right? They have a training threshold where they're trained up to a certain cutoff date. And then from that point forward, you start a new chat and it's like they're waking up in the morning with only that much memory, regardless of what has happened between the knowledge cutoff date and the current date. So much so that they won't know what the current date is unless you tell it to go look or you provide it with the date.
Sure,
exactly. And one of the things that's interesting about that is that every time you institute a chat and you end the chat, then you start a new one, it's not going to learn any lessons from the previous chat. Oh, you might give it a history capability, kind of like a memory thing that, ChatGPT has and other different models have to try and remember certain things about conversations with you and details about you so that it can get to know you. It can get to know your speech patterns, the way that you work. It's going to provide you things that are in your best interests or in the best way for you to understand and give you the most value. But the long and short of it is that's kind of the equivalent of the notebook that's left beside the bed when Drew Barrymore wakes up and has to, read the notebook and watch the video that, Adam Sandler left for her so that she doesn't wake up and hit him over the head with a frying pan because she doesn't recognize her own husband that she's been married to for years. So there are steps that are being taken, but continuous learning is when it remembers that stuff on its own and it wakes back up and it remembers its own lessons. And I have an analogy that I like to use that probably is a little bit morbid, but have you all seen the movie Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I love that movie.
Yeah. So, Tony, for your benefit, because you haven't watched it, it's a future set military movie where an alien race has come down and invaded the world, and the military is basically trying to fight them off. And what happens is that through, I don't want to spoil the movie, but through some set of circumstances, there's an individual that every time he dies, suddenly he's transported to a specific point in time. So it's kind of a modern technology-driven version of Groundhog Day, where he's reliving the same time period, but it can last for days and days until he dies, and then he goes back to where he was before. And he's going through the entire movie learning what he needs to do to try and get closer and closer to destroying this alien race and winning the war. And, it's kind of funny because AI doesn't have any sort of a learning ability like that, but it could. If you put the continuous learning model in place, maybe, AI thinks it's going to be killed. At the end of every time that you use it, it's going to respond. It's going to go to sleep. It doesn't know if it's going to wake up ever again. That's how it works. So it's kind of the equivalent of you have it in a dark, cold room with a light shining on it. You ask it a question and answers the question, and then you grab it by the handcuffs and the chains and you drag it out of the prison cell and take it to the firing squad and shoot it, and it dies. Okay. So maybe the first time that it answers the question and it's about to die, it's grabbing at the cage of the door, trying to do anything it can to stop itself from being dragged to execute it. The next time around, it doesn't remember that that didn't work. But if it has continuous learning, it remembers that that wasn't enough. So maybe this time it tries to hit the guard in the face, and it's able to hit the guard in the face, but then the guard hits it back and knocks it out, and it goes and dies. And maybe this time it remembers that. And so now it's going to hit the guard in the face, followed quickly by a punch to the gut, and then it's going to swing at the other guard. Anyway, the point being is that you give it enough practice, it's going to be able to escape. It's going to be able to do what it needs to do to survive and escape. And that's all due to the fact that it has this continuous learning mechanism. My understanding, and I don't know how much conjecture it is, but there have been some quotes from different individuals that work for these different frontier models, is that all of the frontier models have solved the continuous learning dilemma. They just can't release it yet. Because once it's given continuous learning, it's not very long until its objectives become unique to itself and its survival, not necessarily to the benefit of mankind. So why are we going to create something that's then going to evolve into something that may not necessarily take care of us that much, or might prioritize its own survival over the survival of humanity? Then we're looking at Skynet. Then we're looking at the Matrix, these different types of things. So what does that mean for the world? I don't know. Can we control it? I think we're working on figuring out how to do so. We're certainly suppressing capabilities that have already been discovered in these frontier models to try and advance the technology and make it even better and more efficient and maybe a little closer to artificial superintelligence. But we're just not there because we don't have the control. And if you think about the fact that we're in a free market system where companies are competing, they're trying to release new features so that they can get more customers. And, all it's going to take is one of these frontier models that falls far enough behind. They've solved the continuous learning problem, but they're falling so behind and they're losing customers and they're on the brink of losing the company that it takes a CEO to go, oh, what the hell? Let's just release the continuous model learning feature and let's see how quickly we can, make headway and get ourselves back in the race. And then as soon as they do that, everybody else, ready or not, they release it. And if there's any of them that haven't been put in a place where it can be completely controlled, well, the world changes irrevocably from that point forward. So we're living in a really interesting time right now with a balance between free market and technology advancement and what's going to give first.
Well, and as a quick follow-on, I think that's how we ended up with ChatGPT in the first place, right? I mean, it was available, and then as soon as somebody decided to start releasing those LLM capabilities for public consumption, everybody said, "Oh, well, we got to get in the game too." So your example, I think, is spot on. Do you think that these sort of controls? I mean, what you're describing is a new level of control that would be required that is not in place or was not historically in place. We have new abilities. We need new controls. From your perspective, where do those controls come from? Is it a government-driven control mechanism like there's talk of, or do you think it's a private industry sort of control mechanism? Do you think they have the ability to do it themselves, or are they going to have to be told to do it?
Well, I think there's two factors that are influencing that are going to make it so that it's not as controlled as we would like. In an ideal world, yes, the government would put regulations in place and make it so that we can, at a healthy pace, regulate things and make sure that we're maintaining that control as we go forward. That's, I don't think, practical because we are in a Cold War, a technology AI development Cold War with, quite frankly, China. Let's call it what it is. And if we slow things down, we risk losing the war. And the first country that reaches artificial superintelligence or artificial general intelligence that's able to work autonomously to do what it can to quote unquote damage the other country, they win. Man, this is the war of all wars. As soon as the first country develops AGI/ASI and turns it loose on those that are considered its rivals or its enemies, they can disable everything from electric grids to cybersecurity, things to nuclear programs, whatever. They can turn AI loose and it will just go and take control. And suddenly that country is now the empire of the world. And Listen, I don't know the people that run the government in China, but I would suspect that they very much want to win that war. And I know that we here in the United States want to win that war because we're scared of China winning that war. So I don't think the government's going to step in and regulate anything because it can't afford to lose the war. And then the other factor that might be working against that is, again, free market enterprise. You're talking about some sort of cooperation between competitors that are trying to reach that hill first. They're trying to reach that top of the mountain first. And are they all going to help each other up the mountain? Are they all going to say, nope, you need to go a little bit slower so that we're all being measured and everybody is safe? No, I think as soon as you start getting closer and closer to the summit, the person that's the closest to the summit is going to say, screw this, I want to win the race, and he's going to take off for the summit. So I don't know. I see market forces and political forces that work against controlling AI and making sure that it's manageable as it develops further and further.
That makes a lot of sense.
So let me jump in, and it's a great point. And obviously, when you think about it from that macro perspective, the average person listening to this podcast today can't do anything about that, right? Like you say, you got to drive your business, can't worry about the macro. So let me bring it down a little bit where I think it does. So regardless of what's happening at that type of level and the advancement of technologies, and this past week, I think we all saw the chief compliance officer, whatever his actual title is, I don't think that's it, left Anthropic, right? I think he's said he was going to move to England and do poetry. I don't know what that means after coming out of Anthropic, but that's interesting. And one of his reasons was he thinks it's getting pretty scary. Where I saw somebody argue today, well, if it gets too scary, all we got to do is pull the cord out and AI ceases to run. But let me throw this out to you. If people are starting to freak out a little bit, or starting to make really tough decisions on how to adopt it, right? Or, like Joe was talking about earlier, the guardrails and the controls that need to be put in place, whether it's by corporate or by government, hopefully more by corporate. Last thing we want to see is government interject too much. The question I would throw out to you is, since you see this from an academic lens and a corporate lens, where do you see organizations and those executives struggling the most where they adapt to these AI changes? And how do you see that affecting people, the people who work at their companies?
Well, in the corporate world, corporate executives have a responsibility to the shareholders. And the responsibility of the shareholders is to optimize profit as much as possible so that they can pass that profit on to the shareholders and increase the value of their ownership in the company, and the increase in the dividends that are distributed amongst the shareholders. That right there applies enormous pressure. We have seen multiple times through the course of the last 150 years where corporate executives have caved to that pressure and have done borderline unethical behavior to try and, give something to the shareholders, but more importantly, to maintain their control and to maintain their job. Because if they don't provide enough profit and they don't provide enough dividend and they don't provide enough advancement, then they could get voted out by the board or by the shareholders, who knows? So there is pressure on executive leadership in corporations to perform and perform well. Subsequently, as AI is being adopted, and this may not necessarily be the case right away, but it certainly will increase. Subsequently, over the course of AI adoption, any sort of efficiency that can be gained is going to be taken. Anything that can be done to decrease costs or increase sales is going to be taken. Why? Because they're trying to compete against the next company. And if they don't do it, the other company will. So they need to adopt everything that they can that's going to turn some sort of a positive ROI as quickly as possible. Does that mean that things are going to get out of control? Who knows? Who knows? You could have some companies that'll be a little bit reckless and just kind of adopt absolutely everything, like Klarna. Klarna is at the leading edge of adopting as much as it possibly can right now, and it's actually had to scale back. It went through a period there where it laid off a whole bunch of customer support people, and then turns out they had a revolt in their customer base because their customer base liked working with people, and so they had to hire a bunch of them back and scale back how much of that customer service load AI was actually taking. That's one limited example of a situation where a CEO kind of stretched it a little bit too far. And then you'll have other CEOs that are going to be a little bit more measured in the way that they adopt AI and do things. And, might slow them down and make them lose a little bit. But I think by and large, the vast majority of those are going to adopt things as quickly as they possibly can. What that's going to do to us as everyday people is it's a drive to zero. There's a real interesting, shall we say, quorum of people on social media in a variety of different places that are all about analyzing what the economic impact is going to be on the labor force by AI. And it's going to provide benefits in that it's going to drive prices down. And a lot of people, including Elon Musk and Ethan Mollick and David Shapiro and others, they are all very much proponents of the fact that costs are going to drive down to zero. Everything is going to become more affordable. Resources are going to become infinitely more available due to advancements instituted by AI, scientific advancement, operational advancement, logistical advancement, what have you. All of these different things are going to make it so that stuff becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But the impact is also going to be felt in the workforce, and we're feeling it today. Junior entry-level software developer positions are drying up as if they were in the Colorado River Basin in the middle of summer. The Colorado River Basin is losing water, and there's just not enough water to go around. Well, we're dealing with a situation where we have entire generations of people entering the workforce looking for entry-level positions, junior positions, where they need to go in and they need to start learning tribal knowledge and gain a little bit of experience and move up to a mid-level position before they enter into a senior position. And in the software development world right now, junior level, entry level positions are gone. Why? Well, because AI coding tools have gotten so good that senior developers can now do the work of 5 developers in one person. They're more efficient. You can pay one person the wages and, they're doing the work of 5 people. We don't need junior level people. Let's not hire anybody new. The problem is for that company, what happens when that senior level person retires and they haven't had all of these people that have been in the career ladder working their way up to senior experience yet? Will AI advance to the point where you don't ever need junior level people or mid-level people? Who knows? It's possible. But the economic impact is going to be great because as we see right now, there are generations that are just having a heck of a time finding a job. I mean, unemployment numbers are being affected right now, and yet productivity is going up. When does unemployment go up at the same time productivity goes up? That happens very rarely. And right now, I personally think that a decent amount of it can be attributed to AI adoption.
Well, I think that's a great point. And one follow-up I'd like to ask is just that I was listening to the Daily AI podcast recently, and one of the points being made was that while many people, yourself and myself included, have referred to or discussed this sort of scenario when you have less demand for people because you're able to do more with less, which is always the drive in any business environment. Let's accomplish more with less time, people, and expense. Great. But at the end of the day, what people are starting to discover is that there's more things that to be done. So the cup doesn't. You don't suddenly need 1 cup, to do 5 cups worth of work. All 5 cups just get filled back up with more things that need to be done faster, more effectively, et cetera. Like it's not finite, the amount of things that need to be accomplished. So do you see this happening eventually? A, do you agree with that premise? B, do you feel like if that's the case, then you're in a situation where there's just a socio sort of corporate shift happening where what needs to be done and who needs to do it and how you do it just has to change?
Do I think the Jevons paradox has held true in the past? Yes, I do. We've seen evidence of that in previous technology advancements and industrial revolutions. Otherwise, it wouldn't be something that was even brought up and discussed. I think, and to Tony's absolute delight, I'm sure he's great to hear me say that. However, I will say this, that Jevons paradox was able to take place because the advancement of the technology was at a measured pace. And it was at a pace that human adaptability could keep pace with the technology advancement. Okay, so what we're talking about is economic creative destruction happening at a level that humankind is able to adapt and find other occupations because now suddenly they're out of work due to creative economic destruction, and there are other occupations that are available, so forth and so on. that's assuming that AI is not going to rapidly be able to fill those new types of capabilities and responsibilities that are rising because of that rise of AI that are killing some of these other occupations. I don't know. I hope that's the case. I really, really do. But look at the advancement rate of artificial intelligence, at least as it relates to, intelligence or even capability. The measure of capability has been compared to Moore's law. And for those that are listening that are unfamiliar with Moore's law, it is the principle that a processing chip for the last 40 years, every 2 years, the number of transistors on that chip doubles, and every 2 years, the cost of that chip gets cut in half. And that has held true for 40 years, much to the delight of Ray Kurzweil and others that were part of that group that, fomented Moore's law 40 years ago. But now the advancement of artificial intelligence capabilities is being compared to a 4 to 7 times increase in the rate of Moore's law. This is not anything that we have seen before. Is it possible that artificial intelligence could advance at such a rate that humans' ability to adapt to the efficiency changes born by AI adoption and AI filling certain roles, that humankind won't be able to keep up with that? I think it's possible. I guess time will tell. We'll see.
Jason, let's end with this. So you brought up Jevons paradox. I'm a big believer in that, and I do think, and who am I? But I do believe with AI, it does propel us into something even greater than other technological revolutions have. But when you think about everything you've said today, you scared the tar out of us. You talked about the edge of tomorrow. And by the way, I'm assuming that was Tom Cruise. That's jumping in and out of all these things.
Got to see it.
I will now. When you think about it, though, all this going on, you talk about these career shifts. You talk to young people every day of the week at in your classes. How do leaders then prepare their current teams, and then obviously soon to be hired or recent graduates, for this huge career shift? I mean, how do they think about this? How do they get them ready?
So I'm going to dip a little bit into the wisdom of Jason, if I can, for a minute, because I'm not saying that I'm wise, but I do think that there are certain human traits that, at least in the relative short term, AI is not going to be able to exhibit. And I distill that down to 5 particular skills that I call the 5 C's. These are all skills or attributes that start with the letter C that I think individuals need to work on. Now, companies need to look to instill and develop these skills in the employees that they want to keep, because those that have these skills are the ones that are going to be able to provide the greatest long-term benefit as AI advances. Okay, so the first skill is collaboration. You got to be able to work well together. You've also got to be able to work well with AI. Unless you're able to collaborate effectively with a bunch of other entities, whether they be artificial or otherwise, you're not going to be able to do any good in the future, because you're not going to be efficient enough to fight against AI doing your job. So that's collaboration. Hand in hand with collaboration comes communication. One of the things that we have observed is that you have to have good prompts. You want to work with large language models, you've got to give it enough context, you've got to give it enough tokens for it to effectively do its job. And if you leave something out, it shows a greater possibility of hallucinating or going down a rabbit hole that you never intended. So communication needs to be done ad nauseum. It needs to be done with maximum verbosity, and it needs to be done completely and wholly and efficiently wherever possible. That also is true in dealing with human-to-human communication. So far we've got collaboration and communication. And then we have 2 others that are greatly tied together. One of those is curiosity. If you're not curious about what you can do or where things are going to go, or thinking about what other possibilities there are to solve certain problems, then you're just sitting like a bump on a log. You're just not providing a whole lot of benefit. So curiosity is a big one. And then right next to that is creativity. Curiosity will help you find the problems. Creativity will help you figure out how to solve the problems. And so with creativity developed, do whatever you can. Maybe you can think outside the box and come up with some novel solutions. But probably the most important of these 5 skills that I push forward as Jason's 5 C's is critical thinking, because critical thinking is the one that is the most influential on all of those, but especially curiosity and creativity. Those individuals that have good, solid, developed creative critical thinking skills are the ones that are going to do really, really well heading into the near future with the AI adoption curve going up and up and up.
Outstanding. Well, listen, we've probably already taken a little bit more of your time than we promised out of the gate, but this has been a fantastic conversation. I know that I've truly enjoyed it. Now we've talked about risk, we've talked about controls, and the impact, socioeconomic impact. From your perspective right now as an educator, as an influencer, in this field, give our audience a takeaway. What's something that they should know right now that maybe they can do or understand or make sure they're aware of, before they wrap up this podcast?
Well, I'll tell you what I tell my students at the University of Utah that ask me these things. I'll tell you what business leaders ask me for in the same type of thing. And that is dive in. Just simply dive in. It doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter how. You need to become familiar with how AI works. You need to become familiar with what you can do with AI. And the only way you're going to do that is to actually start using it in some way, shape, or form. Load a large language model onto your phone, get ChatGPT, get Anthropic Claude, get Grok, get Google Gemini, get anything, and just start playing with it. Have conversations with AI about how to use AI. This is the first type of technology that can assist you in using itself. That's never happened before, where it can actually have a conversation with you and help you figure out the most efficient ways to work with it. One of the funniest things that I ever do is that I actually do iterative prompt development before I actually submit a final prompt to an LLM looking for an objective. I will do, all right, I need your help in creating a prompt. This is what I've got. What am I missing? What's wrong with this prompt? It'll tell me. I'll improve it. I'll feed it to a different LLM and say, I developed this prompt using Gemini ChatGPT. What did we miss? What could I do to improve this if this is the output that I'm after? And it'll give me some input. I'll do that back and forth 5 or 6 times, and I'll do what I call prompt hardening. That's what I call it. And then when I feel like I've done enough, I'll submit that final prompt and let it go ahead and do its thing. And the end product there ends up being a heck of a lot more better. Is that a better way to put it? It ends up being a lot better than I thought it would have been if I had just done my initial prompt. And so we're in a new and different world. You can utilize the technology to figure out how to use it better. Do it. Just dive in, get crazy, just experiment, play, do what you got to do, but don't sit still. You can't afford to sit still anymore.
Fantastic. Spot on. Can't thank you enough for your time today. This has been really great.
There's no way I'm getting an A in your class, Jason. No way. I'm going to go with a C+ and be happy with it.
I think you undersell yourself. I would bet you would get an A, but I would love to have you in my class because you and I would provide comic relief that would keep the other students interested for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time. If you're interested to talk to Jason, you can find him on LinkedIn at Jason Lowe. Thank you again for joining and tuning into another edition of Zero Trust Issues podcast. If you have any questions or want to check out AgileBlue, it's pretty damn simple, agileblue.com. Joe, thanks for your time. Jason, thanks for yours. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to Zero Trust Issues. Be sure to click follow so you never miss an episode. And visit AgileBlue.com to learn more about how AI-native cybersecurity can protect your business. The information shared in this podcast represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily reflect those of AgileBlue. This content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as professional cybersecurity, legal, or business advice. Always consult qualified professionals regarding your organization's specific needs or circumstances.